Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Nicole.
And I'm your host, Jacqueline. You're listening to the first season of Perfictionist.
On today's episode, we are going to be doing our spoiler heavy discussion on Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. We're going to be talking a little bit about the plot as well as our thoughts on all of the twists and turns that happen throughout the story.
Hmm. Maybe a theory or two.
Perhaps. 20-year-old Violet Sorrengail was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant, living a quiet life among books and history. Now, the commanding general, also known as her toughest talent's mother, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates striving to become the elite of Navarre, dragon riders. But when you're smaller than everyone else and your body is brittle, death is only a heartbeat away, because dragons don't bond to fragile humans. They incinerate them. With fewer dragons willing to bond than cadets, most would kill Violet to better their own chances of success. The rest would kill her just for being her mother's daughter. Like Xaden Ryerson, the most powerful and ruthless wing leader in the Riders Quadrant. She'll need every edge her wit can give her just to see the next sunrise. Yet, with every day that passes, the war outside grows more deadly. The kingdom's protective wards are failing. The death toll continues to rise. Even worse, Violet begins to suspect leadership is hiding a terrible secret. Friends, enemies, lovers. Everyone at Basgiath War College has an agenda. Because once you enter, there are only two ways out: graduate or die.
So we start off our book with our main character, Violet Sorrengail, who is a 20-year-old daughter of a high up general. Her mother is General Sorrengail, which I guess carries quite a lot of impact and power, that name.
Mm-hmm.
Her father is deceased. He was a scribe. There are four quadrants. So we mentioned this in the non spoiler review discussion. There are four quadrants. It is the Rider's Quadrant, the Scribe, the Scribe Quadrant, the Healer Quadrant, and the Infantry Quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
So although we don't actually in this book we don't really get to see the infantry quadrant, but we do hear a lot about the scribe quadrant. I'm having such a hard time saying that. um, because Violet was actually trained for the past 6 years with the intention of becoming a scribe like her father.
Mm-hmm.
She When her father passed away, though, her mom was like, no Soren Gale is going to be a scribe. We are all riders. And she essentially hired someone basically to give Violet a crash course to prep her for going into the riders quadrant in the 6 months leading up to the start of this book.
Yeah, and most people are trained, as we said before, for years. Like she trained for 6 years. And these quadrants are basically different sectors of a college, like a war college. So people around 20 years old in this world can choose to attend this war college and specialize in one of the four quadrants.
Hmm.
And that's their way to sort of serve their country. It's not actually referred to as a country, but in terms of understanding.
Yes, exactly. So the relationship between Violet and her mother, General Soren Gale, is very chilly.
Intense.
It's very intense. There's no love lost between them.
No.
Her older brother is also deceased, and it seems like he
Mhm.
was. So there was an uprising of all these like rebels, and the Tirish rebels, and in that uprising, her older brother Brannon, who was a rider, was killed.
Mhm.
So when they quashed, I guess, the uprising, General Sorrengail ordered Zayden Riorson, who is another character in this book, ordered his father's death, execution. So, as a sort of like making the children pay for the sins of the parents, they have made it so that any offspring of the Tirish rebels that were caught or whatever, they are forced to become riders.
Mm-hmm.
So, and once you learn about what it is to become a rider, that is a huge punishment. If you
Yeah.
don't want to be a rider, like, ooh.
And it's very unheard of because although they're not in a time of conscription now, so people can choose to go to the college, in the past there has been conscription. However, the Riders Quadrant has always been by choice, even during those times.
Yeah,
So they've never forced anybody to become a rider. So
except
it's a
for
pretty big,
these
yes,
kids.
it's a pretty big punishment, the fact that they aren't having a choice over that.
Yeah.
But as dim as Violet's family kind of sounds, she does have a lovely sister who is like fighting for her the best she can. And her
Mm-hmm.
sister is like her mom in the sense that she's like very strong and is a rider. Like she fits the bill of a rider, but she's like
Mm-hmm.
fighting for Violet to get to become a scribe as she had been trained to, but the mom is not budging.
No. So Violet's sister's name is Mira. So Mira was off fighting. She's graduated everything. She's made a good name for herself that we find out at the beginning of the book. People seem to like know of her and the things
Mm-hmm.
that she's done. So like she's kind of carrying on that strong Sorengale legacy, but she is terrified that Violet has to go into the Riders Quadrant because
Mm-hmm.
you know, from other people's perspectives consistently throughout the story, we're always people are wanting to protect Violet. She's apparently very fragile physically.
Mm-hmm.
Violet has a chronic I want to say it's chronic,
Illness.
but I think it's just her physiology. She's just got like over stretchy like ligaments and tendons. So it's easy for her to get injured because she also has only been kind of working out or training for 6 months. So she hasn't also developed like the muscle around her ligaments and tendons to protect her joints, I guess. And so we see
Mm-hmm.
her getting injured quite a lot throughout the story due to that
Yeah.
until like Imogen comes to help her like get stronger.
Mm-hmm. And it is alluded to that when she was either in vitro or like a baby, she something happened. Like there was some sort of, I don't know if it was an illness or what, but she something happened to her as a baby, and she was born with like her hair goes from like brown to silver because
Mm-hmm.
of whatever it was. But it's definitely alluded to that something abnormal happened to her when she was either being developed or as a baby.
The theories that are running through my head right now.
Yeah, I wonder if that
So,
will, because it's
and yeah, I wonder if
mentioned
that's
in
going
the
to be
story.
significant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't
And
really
like,
explain. It just, they keep saying like she's sick or she's weak and alluding to it a lot. And it stems from like her birth, but we don't really get an idea of why or what the
yeah.
extent of it is, other than like she is constantly being injured and is thought of as a quote unquote weak person.
But her silver hair, I wonder if that's going to come into play later.
Well, it definitely came into play in this book in the sense that she had to hide it, and that was one of the first things her sister did. Is like, okay, you have to go into the Riders Quadrant, so I'm going to braid your hair in a crown so that we can hide the ends of your hair within the top of the braid, so people
Mm-hmm.
can't see the silver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it's like a telltale sign of who she is. Like her
it
hair,
is.
like is a beacon, like Violet.
Yeah, I just wonder though, like if it'll come into play. Like I'm just thinking about how the dragons like mark people.
Mm-hmm.
with relics.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the hair is some kind of like mark of something more meaningful.
Yeah, maybe when she was a baby or like in her mother's womb, like she was marked even before she was born. And that was
Yeah.
like the effect of it.
So that's what
That's a good
I'm
theory.
just kind of thinking that just came into my mind. So it's not like a well thought out theory, but I'm just wondering.
No, I like it.
Um, I want to discuss my other theories, but we have to get further along in the timeline first.
So Violet's sister is Mira is helping her get ready, and she's trying to give her as much information as she can in the moments walking up to the first sort of initiation, which is the parapet. So for riders to even enter the riders quadrant, they need to pass over a parapet, and that's kind of like if you can't even get across this, then you're not gonna be
Worthy.
successful.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be a incredibly windy, rainy day. So it's making this experience much more difficult than on an average day. And the first thing her sister does, like they do the braid in the hair, and then she gives her better gear. So she gives her proper boots with grip so she won't slip in the rain. She gives her a vest made out of dragon scales is that she like plucked from her own personal dragon, and then she has a friend whose magic is to shrink objects, so shrunk down each of the scales, so she has this impenetrable vest that she can wear. And her sister's like, oh, wear it all the time. It has all these daggers kind of in it that she can use, because the rule is you can only take with you to the
What you
quadrant
can
what you can
carry.
carry.
Yeah.
And so her sister's like throwing all her books out of her bag, being like, you will fall off of this with one gust of wind. You cannot carry this heavy of a bag. You can't take any of your books except for like one that actually talks about being in that quadrant.
And
And she's
fighting.
like
Yeah.
so
How to,
sad because like books are her life up until
yeah.
6 months ago.
Yeah. Her having all that scribe training was extremely beneficial, though.
Hmm.
It gave her such an edge in the rider's quadrant. Like it made up for her lack of physical ability. Um,
Yes.
and because the physical strength is something you can train into yourself, but the what she has, like all of that learning she did for
Hmm.
preparing to be a scribe, is not something that any other rider has. So it gives her a huge edge.
Yeah. And they can access books. So once you got over there, I guess if somebody wanted to, but they're so busy with training and stuff, it's just really not a focus.
No.
So one of the first sort of character developing moments we see from Violet is she meets somebody called Rhiannon on her way up to the parapet. So she has to like climb this tower that's quite a high up. And she meets this girl Rhiannon and asks her to show her the bottom of her shoes, and sees that Rhiannon is wearing the same kind of shoes she was wearing before, the super slippery shoes, and is like, switch shoes with me. I thought at first they like completely switched shoes, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. But it turns out they switched one shoe each. So that each of them had one really grippy shoe and then one not good shoe. And
Yeah,
she
because
like
Mira
gave
had
up.
given her like proper rider boots that were
Hmm.
very like grippy, and yeah, Rhiannon didn't have that. So
No. And yeah, so they each had one good shoe and one bad shoe, and it ended up kind of saving both of them in the sense that like Rhiannon would have fallen off if she didn't have
mhm.
those shoes. And also, I think it really cemented the relationship, and I think it was a very beneficial relationship
It's
for
pretty
Violet to.
funny because Mira told her like don't make friends, and the first thing
Hmm.
she does is she makes a friend like before she even gets to the parapet. There's this really arrogant, horrible character behind her. His name is Jack Barlow, and he's just so aggressive. And then there's this other friendly guy in front of them. I can't even remember his name. And her and Rhiannon and this other friendly guy, he's like telling them about how, oh, he's gonna get engaged and he's got like this lady love back at home. And then they get up
Yeah.
on the parapet and they're waiting their turn, and this little dude who's like so excited about life goes out onto the parapet and falls to his death. So
Yep.
we learn very quickly that you know, like you actually don't know who's going to die. I thought, oh, okay, so it's going to be like Rhiannon, Violet, and then this third person, and they're going to
Yeah.
be like the little threesome squad in this book. But then he went and died, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't even remember his name now. So
No. I
yes,
I remember reading that and then immediately sent you a message and I was like, "Oh, so anyone can die. Don't get
yeah,
attached." And
yeah,
then I went and got attached and I
I know,
shouldn't have.
I
It
know.
like you are warned up front. Anyone can die at any minute. Don't get attached. But it's so hard not to with the characters in this book.
It is. And while Violet is crossing the parapet and Rhiannon's ahead of her, and I guess it's like just really stormy. The rain is just coming. Like it's the worst possible conditions basically for them to cross. So she
Mm-hmm.
can't even really see through like all the. This is how I was picturing it in my mind. She can't even like really see through all like the rain coming down. She can sort of see Rhiannon sometimes and other times not. And she can hear Jack behind her being like, I'm coming for you, Soren Gale. And he
Yeah.
like pushes another person off the parapet and he's just like ready to just, he's like a killing machine.
Yeah, he is somebody who we will hear more about as the story goes on because he kind of becomes like enemy number one for a lot of the story. He is
Yeah.
out for her for no reason, I guess because he knows who she is.
He
But
knows who she is,
even,
but apparently she's quite petite. And they see
mhm,
that as a sign of weakness in the Riders Quadrant. And so um, it it says in I think the codex, the Riders Codex, that
mhm,
like no cadet shall be punished for basically killing off a weaker cadet.
yeah, it's like almost
Basically,
part of their job to weed out the weak.
yeah. Ugh,
Hmm.
it's so weird. But when Violet gets off the end of the parapet, she like turns around. It's like really intense because it's like Jack is gonna catch her. He's about to catch her. And when she gets off, she like whips around, whips out one of her daggers and sticks it into his like well, she puts it
Manhood
near
area.
his manhood area. It's like, how do I say this delicately? And she holds it there and she's like basically like and I was like, oh, she's gonna cut off his manhood area, but Violet's not like that.
Hmm.
She just wanted to make sure he wouldn't hurt her and that he would
Yeah.
step off the parapet and not hurt her. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
but
But
yeah, she made a pretty good enemy.
even before she ends up walking across the parapet, she ends up meeting somebody. And one of the kind of advice that her sister gives her is do not get anywhere near Zayden. And the first person like she meets, like other than the other trainees, is Zayden because he's
Hmm.
on the for the close side of the parapet. Like before you cross it, he's marking people's names to see, who's come in. And so she like he's the first person she meets who's like older than her and
Hmm.
already part of the quadrant. And there's like this intense moment of like, I know who you are, you know who I am.
And Violet also feels this intense attraction towards him, regardless of the fact that
Hmm.
she's not supposed to.
Well, she sees him not knowing who he is, and then is like, "Ooh, hi," in her
Yeah,
mind, and then
yeah,
finds out it's Zeta, and then she's like, "Oh, dang it!" And
yeah,
she's like, "He's gonna kill me. I'm not even gonna get to step out on the parapet. He's just gonna chuck me right over." And like
yeah,
basically like says like, "You're just gonna kill me." And he's
yeah.
like, "Why would I kill you? You're just gonna fall anyways. I'm not gonna bother."
Why would I? Why do I need to do anything? Yeah.
So that was like our introduction to Zayd and him. Like there's clearly some very aggressive tension between the two of them.
There is, but on my second read through, I looked at it completely differently, and I'll discuss my theories with you when we get further along in the timeline.
I think I know potentially where you're going with this, and I think I agree with you. But we
Yeah.
will we will see. And another person she was told not to interact with Zayden, like stay away from him, but she was told to meet up with her friend Dane. So Dane is a family friend, someone she grew up with because his dad is high ranking as well. So their families would often be stationed together. They grew up just like climbing trees and getting into some trouble together. And there's always been like a little attraction, I think more so on her part to him. She doesn't know how he feels about her, But I think she had a little crush on him growing up, like the older friend of the family.
Yeah.
And it's very much that stereotypical boy next door trope of like, he's the good guy, the family likes him, he always does the right thing, and he's a bit older. And so we have this dynamic between the two. He seems very protective of her right off the bat, very suspicious of Rhiannon and their sudden friendship.
Yes. Yeah. Like almost like family, but she's like definitely you can tell has like a little crush on him.
Mm-hmm.
So after she like reunites with Dane, because this is what I was thinking of earlier. Dane is now in second year, so he
Yes.
couldn't correspond with her or his family. So they were quite close. It sounds like growing
Mm-hmm.
up, like besties, and so they get to reunite, and like he actually like she's shaking pretty bad from all the adrenaline and everything, and he takes her to where no one can see, and she's like throwing up.
Yeah.
And because you don't want to like reveal weakness in the rider quadrant. So but anyways, and Rhiannon kind of wants to like make sure she's okay too, and I'm like, okay, this Rhiannon chick seems pretty cool.
Yeah. I like her.
The way that it's set up is there are like wings, so you have wing leaders, and they're
Mm-hmm.
kind of like at the top of the chain of command in the like cadet situation in the school. And then there's the sections, so the talon, claw, and tail. And then each section has 3 squads. And Dane has done so well for himself that he's risen to squad leader
Mm-hmm.
of his squad. So the idea was that she was to get into Dane's squad where he could protect her somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah, and she does end up going into his squad. But something kind of strange happens because he was in the second wing. He was part of the second wing. His squad was in that section. And then once everything was discovered of like Violet is going into his squad, they end up taking his entire squad and switching his squad with one of the squads in fourth wing. And that is obviously where we get the title of our book is Violet is ultimately put in fourth wing. And the reason for this is the wing leader of fourth wing is Xaden. And he
Yes.
wants her where he can see her.
Yeah. Pretty smart.
Mm.
So there's 36 squads total. So there's this thing they've got to prepare for that like basically in my opinion like the most important thing, but then at least I thought it was the most important thing. It's called threshing.
Yes, that's what I thought was going to be like the big
The big
ultimate climax of the book is threshing.
threshing. Yeah, me too. But then it just kept going and there was other big things too. And I was like, this is
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Threshing is just like minor in the grand scheme of things.
It was just the
but it's
first
still
step
awesome.
to all the other big things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So threshing is basically like the day they are like put through literally the gauntlet. There's something they have to go through called the gauntlet. It's so funny now that I think about it. But so they have to like go through a series of like tests, and then they also have to go and see if a dragon will pick them to be their rider. Because like they're like, oh, there's like talk of which dragon will I pick? But like as you get to learn about it, you realize that the riders don't really have a choice. The
Yeah.
dragon either chooses them or they don't get a dragon.
Mm-hmm. It's 100% the dragon's choice.
Yeah.
And the rider is literally just along for the ride.
Dragons are very unforgiving, and we see this actually like right after the parapet because we have Xaden and then a couple of other wing leaders, and their dragons all come and land on the
Mm-hmm.
like
The edge.
the edge. And I remember Dane like being like, "Oh, we're gonna have to get the masons back up here." It's like stones are flying off, and Xaden's dragon is there, and she's huge, and yeah, they will just incinerate anyone they think is like
Mm-hmm.
a waste
You
of
look
space.
at
They're
them
like,
wrong.
"You shouldn't be here," and then they incinerate them.
Mm-hmm. They sense weakness in you. They'll just be like,
Yeah,
shh, gone.
yeah, yeah. So Yeah. And what's super interesting about the dragon and the dragon rider bond is that if the rider dies, the dragon's like sad about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's upsetting for the dragon, but the dragons can often go on to bond with another rider if they choose to later on in their life. But if the dragon dies, the rider dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a very, very powerful bond. But before they can even get to threshing, they have to go through a couple things. They have to do
Hmm.
some combat training and they have to get through the gauntlet. And the combat training is like just one-on-one fighting, but with allowed murder. If you so they you're not supposed to just randomly kill people, but as we mentioned, if you are weak and they think it's for the good of the wing, then they can eliminate weak
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah.
So
And they won't be punished for it.
Violet is she's on the weaker side in comparison, like physically in comparison to the people she's going to have to combat against.
Well, and she just
So
doesn't have the
she
training.
mm-hmm. Yeah, she has very, very minimal training. She has really good armor, but she has to be clever about it. And thankfully, she is one of the most clever people. And she comes up with like a really cool plan to make sure that she does win and progress through the combat section.
Hmm. Yeah, she basically like finds out who she's going to be facing and like challenging the days that she's supposed to be fighting. And then she goes out and collects like poisonous herbs or plants and then just gives
Mm-hmm.
a low enough dose just to give her enough of an advantage to win each time.
Yeah, which is so clever. So while Violet is out kind of picking all the different berries and herbs for her poison, she ends up running into Zayden, who is meeting with a bunch of other children of the kind of rebels or the people who kind of tried to overthrow. And they all are marked with rebellion relics, like tattoos,
Yeah.
signifying that they are the offspring of those individuals. And there's a rule that anyone who is marked can only meet in groups of three. So it's very illegal. It's like death sentence
Yeah.
worthy illegal that they're meeting in this massive group. So she's like hidden up in a tree, kind of trying to figure out why they're meeting. It's like quite nefarious, and she's not sure what to think of it. And she ends up finding out something about Zayden in that moment. All the other kids go, and she realizes that he's just like trying to help them to train and make sure they have a chance to get through to threshing. And she realized like it's not anything necessarily nefarious. It's just like him trying to be a good person.
He's just
And
looking out for
he,
them and yeah.
Mhm. And then we find out he has something called shadow powers, where he knew she was in the tree because he basically commands shadows. And so he like she was hiding in the shadows. So like it was like basically he could see her. And
Yeah.
they had this conversation, and it's like kind of this heated-ish conversation of like, oh, is he just gonna kill me already? And she agrees to keep his secret of not saying that they were meeting, and he owes her one, essentially.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool because throughout the story, it happens a few times where Zayden is kind of like studying Violet, and he goes,
Mhm.
"Interesting." It's like he's like just like really studying her and thinking like, "Hmm, you're interesting. This is
Yeah.
not like,
He's trying to
yeah,
figure her
he's
out, and she
yeah,
keeps surprising him.
yeah,
And eventually they have to get through the gauntlet. And the gauntlet is almost like a not a maze, what do you call it? Like obstacle course
hmm,
on the side of a mountain that they have to get through in order to get to the field that threshing is taking place at. So they do get a couple attempts, and they have to do it with their squad. So the faster your squad is able to get through the gauntlet, the higher chance that they get to like see the dragons first, and then will potentially be like selected by a dragon. So you're trying to like get through this obstacle course as fast as you can, and everyone in your squad should get like the more people who get through it fast is better for your squad as a whole because you're kind of doing it as a team. And they're practicing, and Violet is having a bit of a harder time because she's so petite. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily that she's weak, it's just she's literally tiny and can't reach one of the last obstacles that she has to get through.
Yeah, and that one of the last obstacles she has to get through is actually mimics like a dragon. So it would be like how you would mount a dragon. And but she's a smart cookie, and she was
Mhm.
also talking to, was it Zayden actually?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Zayden, and he was basically like, because she was basically like, I can't make it up, like I can't make it up the last part of the gauntlet or whatever, and he's like, what did he say? It was like, not
The right way is
the right
not the
way is
only way.
not the only way. So she's thinking about that. She's smart. So what she does is she like gets as high as she can, then she throws herself and stabs her daggers in, and then wrenches
Mm-hmm.
herself up. And this causes quite the kerfuffle.
Yes, because one of the other wing leaders says it's cheating.
Mm-hmm.
And Violet knows the codex inside and out. She probably knows it better than anyone. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, no, this is not against the rules. I brought these daggers with me across the parapet. Therefore, they are part of me because
Yeah.
anything you brought with you is considered a part of you.
Yeah.
And therefore, I can use it because it's an extension of who I am.
Yeah.
And so it was agreed that she was right and that no rules were officially broken. So she didn't have to like forfeit or anything.
So there's this moment where they have to kind of line up and stay a certain distance apart, and then the dragons are all lined up too, and they have to like
Mm-hmm.
walk down this path past all of these dragons so the dragons can get a look at them.
Yeah, it's like a parade of people for the dragons. The
It
dragons are like
is
the spectators, and the people are like the
just,
prize.
I know, and they have to maintain a certain distance between each other in case a dragon decides to incinerate one of them, so you don't get caught in the blast if you weren't like supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
caught in the blast.
Yeah.
And they encourage them to talk amongst themselves so the dragons can get like a sense of who they are. And I just, oh my gosh, I was putting myself in Violet's shoes and just imagining that would be crazy. That would be
Mm-hmm.
so scary.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
the dragons in the story come in all different like varieties, and there is one very special dragon that lots of people are interested in because they kind of had dragon school or dragon class where they learned about the different dragons. And there's this one giant black dragon, but as far as I know, he was not willing to bond with anybody, but
No.
they still discussed him because he's just such an amazing dragon. And so everyone was kind of like, oh, I wonder if like we'll get a glimpse of him. So he was like a hot topic of discussion. But then when they actually started walking in, another type of dragon that people weren't expecting to be there was there. So the black dragon didn't show up, but a tiny little gold dragon did, and it's a dragon called a featherlight. So they're often described by their tail.
Feather
Sorry,
tail.
feather tail. And they're described by their tail, usually in their name. And the feather tail, like, usually never bonds. So everyone was like really curious why it was there and like watching people because they're
Mm-hmm.
not known to bond. And it was just like just tiny little gold dragon at the end. And everyone was super curious about it.
Yeah, sounded beautiful.
It did sound so beautiful. And like people were making fun of it. I'm like, how can you possibly make fun of this tiny little gold dragon? Like, I guess because it's all about ferocity and what's the like who's the biggest dragon and like but still, I think even if you maybe didn't want that to be your dragon, you could still appreciate its beauty. But some people were being jerks.
There's a lot of jerks in this book, but
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't be bad mouthing any dragon when I was parading in front of them.
I know
Like,
I
man,
was like very worried at that
the
moment when they were like
audacity.
literally insulting a dragon
Yeah.
into its face. I'm like
The people who were being insulting, they got incinerated though.
they did.
So,
Yeah. And then Violet ends up having a pretty close call because of her vest that she's wearing. It's
yes.
dragon scale. And the dragons can smell. And they're like, why do you smell like a dragon?
So these two big green dragons come over and they're like sniffing her and like shoving their noses into her like upper body because that's where the
Mm-hmm.
corset is. Can you just imagine being like checked out by these dragons?
Mm-hmm.
She keeps it cool really well though, and she's like, "Oh, I bet you can smell like Mira's dragon," and she explains like what
Yeah.
was done there, and they're like, "Oh, okay," and then they go back to their place in the line.
Mm-hmm. Well, and she's like smart enough to realize, like, if I just talk to them and explain, they'll understand.
Mm-hmm.
So we do eventually get to the threshing. So like that was kind of like the parade, but then they actually have to go out onto the field and like capture a dragon. You don't really capture it. You just kind of go out there and see if it'll
It's kind of like a big
accept you.
forested area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're out trying to see if a dragon will bond with them. And of course, Jack has to be Jack. And this whole time, he's been basically trying to kill Violet and hasn't really had an opportunity to do so. And he and a group of people decide that they are going to go after the little dragon. And their idea is, well, if we can kill weak riders, then it should go that we can kill weak dragons. Like, stupidest logic ever. And Violet like, she overhears them or something. She knows this is happening. So she's like, I need to get to the dragon first, the little
She knew
thing,
where it
and
was
warn
too
it.
because she had climbed up a tree, so
Right.
she was able to see where it was, and she could see they were heading towards it. So she was like, "I got to get to the dragon first and warn it."
Mm-hmm.
So that takes all precedent over her finding her own dragon. She puts that all aside to go try and save or at least warn this golden dragon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she's like, she does get to it, and she's like, you need to leave, and is like trying to, like, she just like walks up to it. It's a little dragon, but it's still a dragon, and it's still
I know.
massive compared to her. And she's like walking up to it, and it's like, you need to go, and it's just like, da-da-da.
And then she
And
looks
then,
down and sees it doesn't have claws, it's got paws. So she's like, "Oh, are
mm-hmm.
you completely defenseless? Like, you need to go fly away." And then it doesn't. And she's like, "Can you even fly?"
Yeah. She's like, you have no claws. You might not be able to fly. And I don't even know if you can breathe fire
Yeah.
at this point. And I'm pretty sure we find out it cannot. And it is completely defenseless.
Yeah.
And the boys come and start trying to kill it. And Violet's just like, I'm a tiny person and I will not let you kill this dragon and I will fight you. And that's what
So
she
she
does.
stands between them and the dragon and she starts fighting them.
Three of
And
them.
3 big guys against tiny little Violet with this little dragon behind her, like snapping, like, da, 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 da. Don't
Yeah.
being all
Not
cute
really
and
doing
ineffective.
anything.
Yeah.
Just kind of being like a hype dragon.
Yeah, exactly. But then Violet notices that Xaden and his dragon are watching her.
Mm-hmm.
Watching
But he
watching
can't
the whole
do
thing.
anything about it because
He's not allowed to interfere.
Mm-hmm.
So Xaden and Scale are watching this whole thing go down. And just as it starts to like kind of look bad for, well, I mean, it looks bad for Violet from the beginning because it's 3-on-1.
Mm-hmm.
But just as it starts to look pretty bad for every Violet, she sees Xaden take a step forward and she knows like he's about to break the rules to come help her. She just knows it like in her gut. And then all of a sudden, oh, sorry, I'm just getting like a goosebump. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. All of a sudden, a big, huge dragon lands, and it's the big black one that we had talked about earlier that said it wasn't going to bond with anybody.
He came down.
He came down.
Yeah.
And he
And he
chose
just kind of
Violet.
swoops over.
Yeah. He
And
starts talking to her in her
Mm-hmm.
mind. And she's like, what is going on?
Yeah, and she's still very confused. And he's like, get on me. And he's like kind of gruff with her a little bit. And she's like, how am I supposed to get on you? Like,
yeah, I can't. Like, you're huge. I can't even.
And so they have this like hilarious relationship right off the bat. And then he like just like he does something a dragon like would never do normally, and he actually kind of like in a way bows to her, like, so
Yeah.
he extends his legs so she can like walk up him
Walk
like a
up his
ramp.
leg. Yeah. So
And
he
that's
makes a
very unheard of.
concession for her. Yeah, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
shocking. And then yeah, and then she gets on and she settles where they're supposed to sit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's they use like saddle terms, even though it's just like the dragon scales back. So like her hands are too small to grip the pommel. And like the pommel of the saddle is quite often where you'll see like people holding on, like riding in
Yeah.
Western or English. But her hands are so small and he's so big, like he's the biggest dragon around except for
Mm-hmm.
General Melgren's dragon, that she like can't really grip very well.
Yeah.
And so he takes off and she's like flinging around and like I
Mm-hmm.
cannot hold on or whatever.
Yeah.
And she flies off. I was like,
She just
oh.
flies right off. And like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the end of Violet. Oops.
I know. And I thought, oh my God, did she fly off? And now, like, the thoughts I had in my head were like, the dragon's going to be so disgusted with her that he's just going
Yeah,
to
and
let
just
her,
like be
like,
like, never mind, I changed my mind.
oh, yeah, you
And I think
suck.
they do. I think oftentimes if a rider falls off the
Yeah.
dragon's like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can't handle me,
Yep.
and
They're
just flies away.
on Threshing, people died because
Yeah.
they took the dragon, they chose each other, and on their first flight, their rider fell, and they're like, well, I guess you weren't worthy, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
But her dragon's kinder. He sees more to her than her ability to stay on his saddle, and he just bloop, picks her
Yeah,
up
he
like a.
picks her up and he flings her back up onto his back and he
Mm-hmm.
says, we have to put on a show. So he uses his own magic to clamp her legs down onto him so
Mm-hmm.
she's not even in control of the fact that she's staying on him now. He uses
Yeah.
his magic and then they're like spiraling and like doing all these crazy moves and then he's like, I think we made our point. He's all like
Yeah.
disgusted by it.
Yeah, because he's like the not like the king of drag, but he's like kind of the leader of dragons. In the dragon world, everyone follows him.
He's like legendary. Like
Hmm.
the dragons are like, I want to say like submissive to him almost. Like,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's correct. And then the unexpected twists kind of keep on coming because once they get back to the landing spot, like all the dragons land in formation according to like rank, and they land, and then she has to go up and give the dragon's name. And the way that the person recording it knows is they have to give the dragon's full name, and only the writer and the recorder can know the full name, like the
Hmm.
scribe who's doing the recording. Everyone else like doesn't, like, that's how you can prove that
The
the
dragon
dragon
chose
has
you.
chosen
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And so she gives the black dragon's full name, and then she hears another little voice in her head, and
Yes.
it's the golden dragon has come and stayed, like, landed right next to the black dragon, and has said to put down her name as well. And then she
Yeah.
like says to her dragon, like, what do I do? And he's like, you write or you say her name, like, put it down.
Yeah.
So her dragon is like agreeing to have another dragon bond with her as well.
Yeah.
So
So,
two
and this has
dragons.
never been recorded in history before. She has
Mm-hmm.
bonded with two dragons. And I was just like, yes.
And one being the most like
Underdog to the, yeah. Major underdog moment there. That was
yeah,
awesome.
no, it was so cool. And like the black dragon is obviously one of the most, he's the most impressive dragon that is available for bonding.
Yeah.
And then the second dragon is a dragon who like is notoriously known to never bond. So she's
Mm-hmm.
gotten two dragons who were not willing to bond with her.
Yeah.
And there's like a massive discussion about if this can stand. And then the dragons have to go have a meeting because
Yeah.
ultimately it's not up to the humans whether it can stand.
They
It has
hold
to
a
be the
meeting.
dragons.
They have to hold a meeting called the Empyrean. And it's like the humans can squabble over whatever they want, but it's ultimately they have no control over this
Mm-hmm.
situation. So they hold the Empyrean and then they come back and it's fine. She's got two dragons.
Mm-hmm. And isn't the book actually called The Fourth Wing, the Empyrean?
The series is called the Empyrean
Oh, okay.
series.
Yeah. So obviously that is a very important term and like maybe signifies just how important it is that the dragons really do have the final say.
Yes. I agree. So this all happens. This is like this insane day of her, like, and then Jack like bonds with this like smaller dragon, and I'm like, ha,
Mm-hmm.
ha. But her troubles don't end, because you'd think like she's bonded with the biggest dragon. Like, you think everybody else is going to be like, oh, okay, I like totally underestimated you. You bonded with two dragons? What? No. The Some people are like that, but it puts a huge target on her back, because there's a bunch of riders who are not bond who didn't bond.
Mm-hmm.
And while the bond is fresh, new, and ultimately because of that weak, this is a very like vulnerable time for the dragons and their new riders, because the unbonded could potentially come and kill the rider so that they could take their dragon.
Mm-hmm. And even someone like Jack, who has a maybe less impressive dragon, can choose to try and still get a more impressive dragon.
Yeah. So this puts a huge target on Violet's back.
Mm-hmm.
Dane is dismayed, because he thought once she bonded with Tarn, his name is, that her troubles would be over, because it's like, well, she's got like this huge dragon that you don't want to mess with. But
Mm-hmm.
it's simply not the case.
Speaking of Dane, he kind of goes for it. On the threshing field, he kisses Violet. And she's
Yeah.
like, this is kind of what I've been dreaming of for a long time now. And yet, there's no spark.
Zero spark.
Zero spark. Dun, dun.
Wah,
No, it
wah,
was kind of
wah.
sad.
It was sad.
And
Like, she wanted it for so long, and then when it
mhm.
happened, she was like, oh.
Yeah, it was just like that awkward moment of, oh, yeah, like, what do I do now? Because, like, I
Yeah.
think for him, like, he was into it.
He was into it.
And she was just like, oh, no. Oh, no, no. What has
Yeah, he
happened?
was into it for sure, because she was like, oh, we can't, like, we have to just stay friends. And so
Hmm.
like, we got to talk about, so they end up talking about it, and he actually brings it up first, and he's like, oh, we can't do this. And she's like, yeah, I agree. And he's like, because it's against the rules. And she's like, oh, for God's sake. She gets so exasperated, because to her it's
Hmm.
like his like steadfastness and like loyalty towards the rules. For Violet, she would have like loyalty towards her loved ones, I think, first. Or like, Violet is guided by an internal excuse me, Violet is guided by an internal moral compass, more
Hmm.
so than written rules. And Dane is not.
Yes.
Dane is guided by the written rule, and either doesn't have or seems to disregard a moral compass, because
Yeah.
it's and he's, yeah, anyway. So Dane. But
No, I think that is an incredibly important point in regards to his character, is that rules are the utmost important thing
mhm.
above all else,
She
which
loses quite a
worked
lot of
out.
respect for him when he's
Hmm.
telling her this.
Yeah, I think in some ways she's like, oh, good, I can just like be like, yes, it's the rules, so that
Hmm.
I don't have to like engage in this awkward conversation about not having enjoyed that. But at the same time, I think she is kind of like, oh, he's maybe not the person I thought he was in some
Hmm.
ways. The fact that he would choose a
Yeah.
rule over friendship.
So there's also all this drama going on between like the wing leaders and the squad, like all the upper and the chain of command, because of what Violet did during the gauntlet, the
Hmm.
way that she and so there's like all this unrest. And when it comes to like confronting the whole thing, because Amber, that's the wing leader who took issue with the way that Violet did things, like, even though
Hmm.
she technically like got off on a technicality, it's like the technicality is the rules of the codex, so like you should just like forget about it, because she didn't do anything wrong, but she won't let it go. So Amber is still thinking about how she's PO'd that Violet used her dagger during the gauntlet to get up that final obstacle. She's choked about that. She's not letting it go, and she feels like She feels that, I guess, Violet is needing to pay for this crime. So in the codex, one of the rules is that the cadets shall be safe when they're sleeping. That no one is to attack another cadet while they sleep. That's like the one rule about killing people that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Not while you're sleeping. That's I think you get that's a capital offense. Like I think you get
Yeah.
offed for that if you do that. So Violet, she decides to go to sleep as one does at night. So redundant, but anyways, uh, and she ends up being attacked, and she sees this Amber is the one who unlocked the door for everybody to go in there and attack her, and it's these
Mm-hmm.
unbonded riders who obviously want to like take possession of Taryn.
Mm-hmm.
And she's actually having a dream, but Taryn wakes her up because he senses what's happening.
Yeah.
So she's in this like huge fight with these people trying to like not die, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And Darna, her little golden dragon, gets involved and gives. So the reason I guess Feathertails don't bond is because they can't just like share their power. They like give you their full gift, and they don't. It's like not very controlled. So
Mm-hmm.
and Darna helped Violet, like gave her the power to stop time.
Yeah.
Incredible. So Violet like
Mm-hmm.
stops time,
For
and it's
just
like
like.
30 seconds or so,
Mm-hmm.
like just very briefly she stops time, and she's like, what is going on? And then that gives Zayden enough time to come in, and then he just like kills like everybody that's there.
Mm-hmm.
So she can't believe that it was Amber like was in on this whole thing, because like she can believe it, but she doesn't think anyone else will believe her because Amber is obviously a very strict rule follower. She's a wing leader of another
Mm-hmm.
wing, and she and Dane had a thing as well
Mm-hmm.
the previous year. So basically, the reason I bring this up is because we learn about Andarna's ability, which is crazy. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like crazy. And then B, when the whole thing is brought up and she's basically pointing the finger at Amber and Amber's denying it, Dane doesn't believe Violet, and he is
Mm-hmm.
like demanding that she like take back what she said, basically. So Dane's ability is that if he like grabs onto your head, he can see your memories.
Yeah.
And
I think it's like if he puts his hand like on your face, kind of.
yeah, so he's like lunging for her with his hands, like, well, show me. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, because it's like hugely
Invasive.
violating.
Mm-hmm.
And he obviously doesn't believe her. So that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for that relationship, because yeah. But the reason she jerked back was not because she didn't want him to see her memories because of herself. It was because she didn't want other people to find out about Andarna's ability. And like Taryn was
Mm-hmm.
like, nobody can know. So Taryn, because he's like old and powerful, he was able to show everyone the memory excluding the part with Andarna's powers. So they were able
Yeah.
to then see, and then Amber was like condemned to death.
Mm-hmm. And that's not something that dragons typically do. They usually don't share memories. So she had to like sort of give permission, but also ask Taryn to give everyone the memories because it's not really something that's ever done. So
Mm-hmm.
again, he sort of not breaks a rule, but does something out of the ordinary in order to protect Violet or do what she's asking.
He definitely concedes to her, which is like so
Mm-hmm.
not what dragons do.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting.
Kind of jumping back to Andarna for a second is right after the attack, Zayden knows something fishy is going on. And so the reason why Zayden is aware that Violet needs help is because his dragon, Scale, and Violet's dragon, Taryn, are mates. So they are able to communicate in a special way being mates, which also means that Xaden and Violet are tied together. Like their literal lives are tied together. Because as we mentioned earlier, if a rider dies, then the dragon can be so severely heartbroken that the dragon can die as well. And if a mated dragon dies, then its mate will die. So if Violet dies, then Terran could potentially die from heartbreak. And if Terran dies, then Scale would die from heartbreak. And if Scale dies, Xaden 100% dies.
Yeah.
So Violet's life and Xaden's life are linked. So he's
Mm-hmm.
like so linked with her now that he's basically become obsessed with her and making sure she's okay. And that's why he was there and why he reacted so strongly to the
Mm-hmm.
attack. But he also was like, we need to know what happened. Like he recognized that something happened in the room that was beyond explanation. So they go and speak with the dragons, and that's when they find out that Andarna has the power to stop time. She gifted that power to Violet, which kind of depletes her as a dragon because she gifts it and doesn't like it's her power, it's not Violet's power,
Mm-hmm.
and which is very different because she is not a full-blown like she's not an adult dragon, she's an
She's only
adolescent.
like 2.
Yeah, but
She's
she
a
doesn't want you to call her
baby.
a baby. She's not
She
a
is a
baby,
baby. She
but
is
she's
a
a
baby.
baby. And so she was not supposed to leave the Vale, which is where the safe spot for the dragons. That's like where the dragons reside, is in the Vale.
Mm-hmm.
And the Feathertails don't leave the Vale because they are still adolescents.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a kind of snarky adolescent who's an orphan, so they kind
Mm-hmm.
of let her get away with things.
Yeah.
And Terran and Scale have kind of adopted her, which is kind of why the whole situation went down the way it did.
Yeah. I
She's
just
really
really like
cute.
that storyline.
Yeah, it's really, really adorable. But
Yeah.
kind of going back to the magic, do you want to explain a little bit about sort of the dragon's magic and how it links and how it's different than Andarna gifting her powers?
So I guess what ends up happening is Taryn and Scale or anyone who's bonded to a dragon, they can kind of channel their power to their rider. So at first they can do like lesser magics, like opening doors or like lifting small objects and like grabbing them out of the air or whatever. But what is really important is that they manifest a signet, and the signet power is always unique to the rider's individual personality, and it says
Mm-hmm.
more about the rider than the dragon. So you never know what your signet is going to be. So Dane's signet is reading people's memories. Xaden's is controlling shadows. So the only thing is that generally, like once you start channeling, if your signet doesn't manifest within around the average time of 6 months, you'll like explode.
Explode.
You're dead.
Yeah, the magic
um,
like builds up, and it's
yeah,
almost like the magic needs to be released in a channeled way. And if it doesn't have that channel to be released, then the magic will explode within you.
yeah,
Is what how I read it. I could be 100% wrong, but that was what I was picturing.
yeah. And then there's also signet abilities that are illegal. And
Mm-hmm.
so we see one of those ones kind of crop up. This poor guy, his signet manifests, and it's he can read minds like from any, like he could
He
just look
doesn't
at
need
you
to
and read
touch
your
people.
mind.
Yeah.
No. And the reason that is illegal, obviously, it's a massive security issue.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going like nuts and he was freaking out. And one of the professors just came over and snapped his neck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's capital offense. You have to
Yeah.
die. Oh,
So,
and as you were mentioning the situation with Amber, and like eventually Violet was proven to be correct, and Amber was put to death because of
mhm,
that, which obviously made Violet very sad because something we know about her as a character is she doesn't kill people. She always finds a way to disarm her opponents and
mhm.
never kills people.
Never
So
to
this is
kill
the
them.
first person who has died directly because of something she did.
Yeah.
Like even the boys who attacked her, she had an opportunity to kill one of them, Like,
She
sorry,
did.
the boys who attacked Andarna. She had an opportunity to kill one of them because he had been passed out, and she chose to let him live.
I think she has the opportunity to kill people quite often just because she's
Hmm.
so good with her throwing daggers, but she always goes for the
Yes.
shoulder to disarm them
Hmm.
rather than like the heart or the neck or the eye.
Hmm.
Right? So she I think could be quite deadly if she chose to be, but
Yes, I agree.
she has a soft side.
She does. She's just like, she wasn't trained for battle. I think she's coming to understand her strength as a person and realizing that she can be a rider in her own right,
Hmm.
but her heart is softer than a lot of the other riders.
Yeah. So because of how her and Zayden are so interconnected, um, Zayden assigns a bodyguard essentially for
Hmm.
Violet, and his name is Liam, and he's quite a likable character.
He is very likable. Considering how new this story is, I've seen fan art of Liam, and it was before I even finished the story. So I was like, oh, he must like become a bigger character. So it's like, I think he's a fan favorite.
Yeah, I agree. And what's so funny about the fan art is whenever I've seen fan art of Liam, I instantly know it's him before even like reading
Oh,
like
really?
yeah, like I was like that looks like Liam from Fourth Wing, and then it's like Liam from Fourth Wing, and I'm like, yeah, you totally got it, good job.
Mhm.
Like, yeah.
He's kind of like the rock star of the first years. He's just very good at everything.
Hmm.
And we do learn that as much because of Zayden. Him and Zayden actually grew up in the same foster family together, and Zayden kind of trained him because
Hmm.
they were both one of the, like, have the rebel relics on them, and kind of owes his life to Zayden and stuff. So
He is the
that's,
one also who revealed to Violet about the essentially conscription of the
mm,
marked ones, the kids with
yeah,
the rebellion relics, because she had no idea that that's how it
yeah.
worked.
And they become like super, super close friends because he literally follows her everywhere and sometimes he sleeps outside her door,
Yeah,
much to
and
her
he
dismay.
has like a little quirk where he's always like wood carving with a knife,
Yeah.
and
And he
he
always
makes
makes
her
the
cairn, and
dragons.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just super love his character,
And he's like flirty, but like not in a way that,
not in a gross way.
no. And very
Yeah,
much not like he's actually trying to do anything with her. Just
yeah,
like, he's
it's
just a
just like a
very
flirty
friendly person
personality.
for, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I really like their relationship that develops.
yeah.
And kind of going back again to the dragons and the fact that Zayden and Violet's dragons are connected and that they kind of have this telepathic situation going on between like all four of them because of that. There's a scene where the two dragons are having an intimate moment together, and typically the dragons would put up a shield when they're going to be engaging in such activities, but this time they had forgotten, which meant the full impact of the emotions that were happening on the dragon's end were being flooded to their human bonded humans. So all of a sudden, Violet is feeling all these things she's not quite sure about, and she ends up kind of going for a walk because she's like, oh, I need to get out of here. Things are
She even
starting
looks
to
at
feel weird.
Liam for a second,
Yeah.
and she's kind of like, "Ooh, boy, you could help
Yeah.
me scratch this itch." And then it's like she's clearly not herself, right?
Yeah. I think at that point she's like, I need to get out of here before I do something I regret.
Yeah.
But she ends up running into Zayden, who has also removed himself from people to make sure he doesn't do anything he regrets. And so the two people who are in this very lustful kind of energy going on are now face to face. And they end up having their own little romantic moment. But Zayden does kind of eventually realize, like, we are only doing this because of what our dragons are doing, and has the wherewithal to kind of pull back. But Violet is like not super happy about it. She
Yeah.
was ready to just give in.
She's been nursing a pretty big crush on Zayden. Like, she's
Hmm.
so physically attracted to him, and then the more you learn about him, like, just the better he gets.
Yeah. The physical attraction was there from day one. It was just kind of the mental idea of him being like her enemy.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then realizing, okay, maybe he's not this monster that everybody paints him to be. Like, he's
Hmm.
not his father, he is his own person. And the more she learns about him and the more she just sees like how protective he becomes of her, I think the more she starts to have feelings for him as a person, and like it's less about the physical and more about like the mental.
Yeah. And she does feel the spark, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
unlike
Oh,
with Dane, right?
yeah. I
That
think
was
she
like a.
knows that it's like a true spark, but I think part of her maybe is like, oh, maybe it was just like the dragon thing. And is
Hmm.
like trying to convince herself that maybe she's like overreacting.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see like the tension between them. This is like the kind of slow burn romance aspect of it. It's always there. You can definitely see they both like each other, but they're both trying to convince themselves that they don't.
Yeah, exactly. So eventually, Violet's signet does manifest, and it
Hmm.
actually like manifests in kind of a time of stress, but it comes out and she can wield lightning. That is
Yes.
so cool.
And it's like
But
such an impressive moment when she chooses to wield it, but it's also very meaningful because she ends up killing somebody with her lightning.
yeah,
So it's like the first time she uses her power, she takes a life. And this is the first time she's ever directly killed anybody.
yes, yeah. So it's pretty intense, and also she doesn't really have the most control over her powers. So like in that time, it was like good that she killed that person,
Yeah.
but like if she were to be like, okay, like to make a targeted attack, she doesn't have that type of control. Like
Yeah.
I want the lightning to
She,
go there and it goes over there, kind of thing.
hmm
So she needs help with her controlling her signet.
hmm Yeah, because like what was happening was they were in the middle of, they have war battles. So they're in the middle of the war battles, and Jack tries to kill Liam. So in revenge of Liam, she ends up lightning striking the
The
mountain that Jack
tower.
was kind of on, or
Yeah.
the tower, sorry, that Jack was on, and the tower collapses, and that's what kills him.
And
So
she
she
kills
didn't actually
Jack.
like, yeah, she kills Jack because the tower collapses.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like she meant to kill him. It was just the situation
It
unfolded in
was,
such a way.
yeah.
And thankfully, Liam is okay and he survives the situation. But it
What an
was like,
intense offensive power.
yeah, and it was a very like just intense moment in general because of so many things that were happening at
Yeah.
that during the first battle
Yeah.
of the war battles that were going on. But you're
Yeah.
right, she did have to start like training this crazy power she now has.
Yeah. I didn't expect, I was so curious to know what like her signet would be, and I wasn't expecting it
Yeah,
to be something so cool.
I 100% thought it was going to be healing, and she
Yeah.
even thought it was going to be healing.
Yeah.
In the story it says that she thought she was going to have healing, and I was like, that would make so much sense because she's, has some physical setbacks that if she could heal herself, that would be so
Helpful.
like meaningful, helpful for her.
Yeah.
And her brother had healing powers. That was his signet. And I was
And
like,
they
oh, maybe
also
they run in the
mentioned how
family.
rare it was. So I thought,
Hmm.
yeah, it could be.
I
Yeah.
think that was an intentional red herring.
Yes.
So after the first battle, they end up winning the chance to go off and see an actual combat station. She ends up meeting up with her sister, who's stationed there, and Rhiannon actually gets to meet up with her sister, who recently had a baby, which is like a really happy little moment. But it was cut short because there was an attack at that area. And all throughout, we're kind of hearing about these attacks that are happening more and more often. And it's kind of like puts a little question in your mind, like, what's going on? Why are
Oh
there
yeah,
more
and
attacks
wards
happening?
wards failing and stuff. Yeah.
And part of the reasons why the humans and dragon have teamed up is because the dragons can create these wards around the town that they're like around their continent area. And so a lot of things are happening in the background in regards to the safety of the people as a whole. So at this point in the story, Violet and Xaden have kind of given in to their ongoing will they, won't they love thing that they have going on. And they fully just commit to being in at least a sexual relationship. And it's a very electric a relationship, one might say. They end up basically completely destroying her room.
Yeah, it's actually
And
so intense.
it's very intense.
Yeah.
And like her room is like her wardrobe needs to be replaced. Her like sparring totem thing needs to, like, it's just absolutely destroyed. And in the process of cleaning up, they actually find the book that her sister had kind of snuck to her. So when she went and visited her sister, she had snuck her childhood fables book that talks all about fables and different fairy tale creatures. And in the book, she sees that there's a little note written by her dad. And it's kind of talking about picking sides and like he knows she'll make the right choice. And she's like really confused about what this message her dad was trying to say. But kind of near the end of his life, he was so heartbroken by the death of her brother that he wasn't really acting his normal self. So she kind of puts it aside and was like, oh, I don't know, maybe he just wasn't feeling quite well when he wrote this. But it's in the back of her mind. And their relationship continues to kind of go on. And they have, like, that's kind of like the first time. And then I think they were a little bit like, oh, maybe we shouldn't still, or trying to keep it under wraps a tiny bit. Like, they don't want to throw, like, it's not against the rules for her to be in a relationship with a wing leader, but it's a little bit frowned upon for first
Mhm.
years and wing leaders to be engaging. So they're like not throwing in people's faces, but they do end up having another very explosive night together. And when they're like engaging in their moment, Liam, her little shadow, who's always around, normally he's not around when they're doing this, but he
No.
does come up and is like, because she's with Zayden, he does come up and like bangs on the door and he's like, we're being attacked. So they're under the impression that the school is being attacked. But it turns out that it's actually just the second battle in the war battles that they have to compete in. And so they end up getting sent off to these different areas to compete. So like each, they like kind of are divided into various groups, and each group is sent to a different tower location that they need to sort of defend. And things get really, really twisty here. At first, Dane is very reluctant for her to go on Zayden's team and is like, no, she needs to come on my team. But he doesn't have any say in it. She has to go. Like, she's going with Zayden. So he gives her like the weirdest farewell ever. And it's just like, I'll miss you, kind of like nice knowing you sort of thing. And you're like, that's really weird, dude. But you don't think too much of it at this moment. But we really see that this is kind of like a big twist on that nice boy trope. And we see how not nice Dane actually ends up being
Mhm.
when we realize what's going on here. They end up flying to kind of a fort or hold that is sort of near the border between Navarre and, how do we say it?
Poromil?
Poromil.
Mhm.
Navarre and Poromil. And they're like sitting down by a lake, and all of a sudden these griffin riders come in. And Violet is just like, what is happening? Because the Griffin Riders are the people who have been attacking them.
Mhm.
So they are the people of Poromil, and Poromil is at war with Navarre. So Navarre has the dragons, and they are fighting Poromil with the Griffin Riders. And so she's like completely baffled about what's going on here. And it turns out that Zayden has been working with the Griffin Riders, giving them weapons. So they are these specific special weapons that can kill venin. And venin are these creatures that we heard about in the fairy tales. So Violet is just like feeling so incredibly betrayed. Like, I can't even express how mad I was at this point. I remember like reading up to this moment and sending you a message being like, he better not. This better not be going where I think it's going. This cannot be happening right now. I was so mad.
Mhm.
So Violet is told that the fables in her storybook are actually real, that the venom, these creatures that like suck the magic from the earth, and they have like these blood red eyes, and they're basically like these soulless evil magic wielders who have created wyverns as their mounts. They're real, and they have been attacking the people of sorry,
Poromil.
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 They have been attacking the people of Poromil. So when they suck the magic out of the earth, they destroy that land. So the barrens is actually where they have been residing, but they've completely depleted the resources from that land, so are now encroaching on Poromil territory. And the Poromil people have been fighting for their lives. And they have been asking Navarre for help and assistance, but Navarre has been lying to their people, saying, like, pretending they don't know anything about this. And so it's like this massive, shocking moment of like, the country, or it's not a country, they don't call it that, but I keep referring it to that because that's what we call territories.
Yeah.
But Navarre's leaders have been hiding from their people the fact that there is this war happening and kind of covering up the truth. So Violet has been raised thinking, one, that Venom and Wyvern are fake and just mythical creatures, and two, that the people of Poromil are the bad guys. But in reality, they're just trying to survive. And so Xaden knows the truth, and he's been trying to help them. And actually, Xaden's father and the whole uprising that happened was because of this. It was because the people in the uprising were just trying to help. And the kind of heads of Navarre didn't want it to get out, so they hushed the whole situation by saying they were rebels.
Yeah. So Violet, this goes back to like her character of like she's got that internal moral compass. She's not gonna like discriminate against Poromil in this situation because those villages, regardless of the war or whatever, those are innocent people, like civilians. So she can see that like Xaden is doing the right thing, right? Can you imagine being in her position though, like being the daughter of the General Sorengale, who is basically like essentially enemy number one?
Well, by choosing Xaden and to like believe him, she's completely betraying her family and going against them. It's like she has to choose between her family and like the reality
but
she's
like
facing.
the way that Violet sort of goes, the way that she operates is her internal moral compass, not necessarily I'm going to do this because of my blood, or I'm going to do this because of the rules. I'm going to do this because this is the right thing to do or not to do.
Yes.
So, yeah.
This story is really big on like right versus wrong. And she's like the moral compass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole thing is kind of set up on purpose because the person who sends Xaden's crew to that area specifically did it because they knew what was going on. So the betrayal of a lifetime is actually not what Xaden did. It turns out that Dane has been reading Violet's memories without her knowing. So he would loving, caringly put his hand on her face as a sign of comfort, but secretly he's been reading her memories. And so he knows information about Xaden, and the kind of higher ups that he's been telling have put together what Xaden's doing. So this has been a setup for Xaden. He now has to either help, because we also find out a venom attack is about to happen right by where they are. So either they can stay and help the people of Poromil, or they can go back and finish the battle with their school. So now they have to choose.
And of course, they choose the right thing to do, which is to go and help the innocent people who are about to be decimated by these venom things. That is so disgusting that Dane did that. Like,
well,
he's
and not
he's
only
probably just following the chain of command, but that's just it. Like, he's the perfect little soldier, right?
completely.
Yeah.
yeah, it leaves such a sour taste. I kind of like it though, in this, like, I like the way his character's written, because it's always like, oh, the good little boy next door, like your family likes him, he's so sweet, he always does the right thing. And it's like, perhaps it's not always the right thing. Maybe doing the right thing, or like doing like what on paper seems like the right thing, like following the rules, isn't the right thing to do.
Necessarily. Yeah.
And it just really sheds a light on, no, sometimes you need to break the rule in order to do the right thing.
He's not strong in character. Like he's gonna follow the rules. He's gonna follow the leader, whether the leader is corrupt or not.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. So
I
disappointed
foresee
in
like a
Eugene.
huge, it's almost like a villain arc type situation, just because,
Yes.
like, how can it not go there?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, that would be really powerful to see that. Because, like, she still obviously will care about him in some sense. They were
Yeah.
friends for a very long time. So that will be really hard if she has
Yeah.
to, like, face against him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's coming. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But as you said, they do choose to stay and fight, which kind of ultimately means they're betraying their, like, Navarre. And so I think there's, like, they're on the run if they choose to stay. Like, they can't really go back because
No.
they've ousted themselves. And because everyone else in the group outside of the Violet has the rebel relics, like, it's a capital offense for them to
Mm-hmm.
kind of betray
Mm-hmm.
Navarre.
Yeah.
So, oh, the battle though it's so intense. I think this is probably the most intense. Like all the other battles were more set up for the college. Like, this is the
Yeah.
only like super real battle
Yeah.
that we see,
Yeah.
and they make it worth it.
She's trying very hard to wield her lightning in a way that makes sense, but like she's totally new at it, and so
Mm-hmm.
there's like all this crazy lightning happening not where she wants it to. But she does manage to combine her signet power with Endarna's time slewing power. And by doing that, it gives her the opportunity to kind of like aim the bolt where she wants it to go. And the way
Mm-hmm.
it's described is so cool. How it's like slowly just like coming
Yeah.
down. Like, yeah. And then she kills that venom creature. And it's pretty cool. But yeah, it was just such a crazy twist. And then after,
Mm-hmm.
you can do this part. This is like the biggest reveal ever.
Well, before that big reveal, we do have to talk about one thing that happens during the battle that is a real downer. So they do end up
Oh,
winning the
right.
battle,
Yeah.
but something incredibly sad happens. I I like that it's realistic. I knew someone was going to die in this battle because I feel like this story just is that way. But I was hoping it would be someone I didn't get attached to.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it had to be someone who I grew to like very much in this story. And Liam ends up dying because his dragon is killed by one of the Wyverns, and he cannot survive without his dragon.
Yeah.
And it just shows the incredible nature of the bond between the dragons and their or the dragons and their humans. And just like the heartbreaking moment of like Liam wanting to be with his dragon and Violet feeling so awful that, because like he saved her, like she should have been the one who was dead, but him and his dragon literally jumped in front of the Wyvern attack and saved her, and it cost him his life. So there's like a lot of emotions.
Yeah, it was very upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
Not Liam.
I feel like I
Kill
could have been
Dane.
I know. I was like, it could have been literally any other of the,
Yeah.
except for Xaden and Violet. I just wanted Liam to, like, literally everyone else in that troop could have died, and it would have
Yeah.
been sad. Like
Yeah.
Imogen, which is somebody who, if you read the books, like, she's a pretty cool character, and she was there, and like that would have been sad if she died. But like Liam,
I know.
I'm still not over it. Clearly.
Uh,
In the process, Violet also becomes injured significantly, and Xaden has yet another choice to make. She's poisoned. She gets stabbed by a blade of a venom, and she gets poisoned. And Xaden has to make a choice of how, like, what he can do to save her. So he brings her somewhere. we don't know where he brings her, but he says we have to bring her to this location. And they're like, are you sure you want to do that? If you do, like, the people he's around, they're like, if you do that, there's no going back. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's literally the only way to save her. So they go there, and a healer ends up healing her. And she wakes up in a place she thought didn't exist anymore.
Yep.
Do you want to do it?
Nope, you do it. You go for
You
it.
want me to? Okay.
Yeah.
So in the whole rebellion situation, they end up just completely decimating the city of the peoples who had kind of turned and were trying to help and pour a meal. And so that city is gone. As far as Violet knows, it no longer exists. However, secretly, the people of that city have been rebuilding it. And Xaden actually has been involved in this process of rebuilding it. But no one is really looking in that direction anymore. So no one has noticed that it's being rebuilt. And his family was like a pretty high up family. So he ended up kind of inheriting this almost like castle like structure that he rebuilt. And he brought her there. And she finally wakes up, and he's like so grateful to see her and that she's alive. And she's still like really taken aback, and it's like, I don't know if I can trust you. Like, yes, I agreed to be on your side because it was the right thing, but like, I still don't want this to be a thing. And then the ultimate thing happens where she's a little like, okay, what's going on? Like, where am I? Like, figures out where she is. And he keeps talking about a person. And we're actually seeing this from Xaden's point of view, which is completely different because the entire book has been from Violet's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden we're on Xaden's point of view. And he keeps like mentioning this person wanting to see her. And like, oh, he's going to be so, like, he keeps talking about this him. And then all of a sudden the door opens, and in walks Violet's brother, who, if you have forgotten, is supposed to be dead. And he actually was the person who healed her because he has the healing signet.
Ah. Oh, that was such a big bombshell. I did not see that coming at all.
No. I think this is probably one of the biggest twists, surprises.
Yeah.
And we had talked about another book where there was a big twist surprise in it, and we're like, oh, that one was like so surprising, didn't see it. Like, this one topped it significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, no way.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And like,
I'm
that's
still
where it
kind of
ends. Like,
speechless about it.
book
Yeah.
one done.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah. And you had sent me a message asking, did I think that, is it Brendan?
Brennan.
Brennan. Did I think Brennan and Xaden were working together the whole time, or did I think it was something that kind of happened throughout? And I personally feel like Brennan has been working with the like rebel group
Yeah.
since his apparent death. I think that Xaden's dad faked Brennan's death because Brennan wanted to be on their team, and that was kind of the best way
To
do it.
So I have another question to expand on that. Okay. Because I think it's a big yes that Xaden's been working with Brennan since the beginning, because on my reread, all of that animosity that Violet was saying was between them was one-sided. She was always like, oh my God, he's going to kill me. That's kind of like an idea she came up with on her own. He wasn't like Jack, where he's like, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
I will kill you. That was never said. Xaden has always gone out of his way to help her only. So, and I think him moving the squad into his wing was another move to protect her. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question now, though. Do you think the whole thing between Taryn and Violet bonding was also manufactured? Like, was that a strategic move? Because Taryn chose Violet for, we still don't really know why. We're assuming it's because of her smarts and because she was saving, like, she was feisty and like fighting for Andarna with no regard to her own life, right?
Yeah, I think he does specifically say that that's why he picked her, is because she said what, like, she asked Taryn, Violet asked Taryn, why did you choose me? dragons choose strength. And he responded to her that there's more than one way to be strong, essentially. Like
I
strength
know.
comes in many forms.
But I'm wondering, though, if because he's made it to scale,
Hmm.
so he knows everything that's going on. Is Taryn not on Navarre's side? Do you know what I mean? Like, has he been like, maybe is he on this other side? Because he and Darna and Scale and everybody have kind of like known what's going on, been known, and Violet's the one who's been in the dark. So I'm just
Hmm.
wondering, like, did they choose, like, did they like, because Taryn is like the most powerful dragon aside from General Melgren's dragon. Was that like a strategic move to bring Taryn over into like this group? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I feel as though he chose her because like, he did know what was going on because he can read Scale's mind, so he knew. And I think he believes that the leadership of Navarre is not the right leadership for Navarre. So it's
Yeah.
not that he's against Navarre. I think that he is for Navarre, which is why he is kind of is okay with everything that's going on. And I think that he maybe could see that Violet was a key to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And like he thinks it's the right side. But he also like I think he says like he didn't want to persuade her. He wanted her to make the choice on her own.
Mm-hmm.
But he like had faith she would
I
choose the
just
right thing.
think that like the whole Taryn choosing Violet goes deeper than her just defending Indarna.
I think he could sense in her that she was the key to the bigger problem that is going on between the factioning areas of the continent.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing that is said, I think that Xaden says it about her. I don't know if it was Xaden or could have been Taryn also, about her power and basically saying, like, your power is the key to everything. Like, your power can change the world.
I mean, she can like direct. It's essentially like placing bombs without having to place a bomb. Like
I got the sense it was more than like the physical nature of her power, though. Like, I feel like there's something more about her. And
that
maybe
we
it goes
don't know
back to
yet. You
what.
mean?
Yeah. And like how her power might develop. But I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if it goes back to what you're saying at the beginning, like maybe she was somehow marked from birth. And then like
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of like one of those stories where it's like birthright, you're the like a chosen one.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she's the chosen one, and Taryn knows before others that
Yeah.
she is this chosen one and that he was like, yeah, somehow recruiting her
Mm-hmm.
to the side he felt was right.
Yeah, I just felt like it was like definitely more than just like the whole war school dragon threshing that everybody does. I think that there was like a lot more strategy and also something that goes deeper, like with her hair and everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just think like all these elements combined together, we're still in for like some more really big reveals. I think.
No, I completely agree. The fact that we've gotten some pretty significant reveals at the end of this story, I think just means that Rebecca is thinking a lot deeper than I am about this book, like, obviously. But I think there's just like a lot more shocking things to come.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I was just thinking like when I was doing my reread, I was like, man, Zayden has never been like, I'm going to kill you kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But the fact remains that Violet held all this hostility and sort of fear towards Zayden because she thought that his father killed her brother, but he didn't.
Yeah.
However, her mother did oversee the execution of his father.
Yeah.
So he has all these reasons to hate the Sorengale name, but she doesn't because her brother's alive. She doesn't have the
Mm-hmm.
same reason to feel that anymore, like that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how book two plays out.
Hmm.
I think that her mom is even more evil than, like, she's clearly evil, but I think it goes deeper. Um,
So in the book of is the book okay? Well, you know, like those little things before each chapter. Sometimes it's from the
oh,
Book
I
of
love
Brennan. Sometimes it's from
those.
like the Codex. Sometimes it's from like different
Hmm.
history books. And in one of them, it mentioned that General Sorengale was not for the
Yes, it did.
the children being conscripted into the riders quadrant, so that
Mm-hmm.
like she was overridden, like indecision, but that does show a softer side of her.
Yeah. I mean, I would much prefer if the twist is like she's being like the whole Brennan thing was set up by her. She knows he's alive and like she's secretly like working for the other team, but
And like
pretends to
maybe
be harsh and
she
mean.
is the way she can get Violet out of like Navarre. She couldn't get her out as a scribe, really.
Yeah. So maybe she sent her into the Riders Quadrant so that she could like meet up with Zayden and then like so I have hope that maybe her mom is ultimately like a good guy in this whole situation and has been kind of fooling everybody. But the fact that her mom's name is Lilith, which is like Satan's wife or
Yes.
something, is a
Yes.
little bit concerning.
Yes.
So I don't know. I feel like it could. I think I would enjoy the story either way if mom is like pure evil incarnate or if she's like totally playing everybody and is
Yeah,
actually like the mastermind of the rebels and is like the ultimate good guy.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know
But
if I'd go as far as that, but I just wonder like what's the point of putting in that little snippet that
mhm.
she was against the children of the rebels being conscripted into the riders quadrant. Like,
Unless it just meant she wanted them to die, because that originally is what was going to happen, is they were all going to just die, wasn't it? And then
oh, well then
Zayden
she's
was
just
like,
super evil.
so I don't know because I could be getting this wrong, but my understanding is they were just going to be dealt with as their parents were through fire, dragon fire. But then
Yeah.
Zayden was like, I will take on the responsibility of each and every single one of these children, which is why he has all the marks on his back. Is that was his like vow to kind of take on whatever choices the children make, he would have to take on the responsibility of like facing the consequences of that.
Yes.
So
I really
instead
want to
of
find
death,
that
they
quote
got
now because I'm
and
like when I
so I
read it
wonder if
I was
she
like,
wanted them all
oh.
to just be put to death.
Yeah. I mean that seems more I was like, oh look, extra depth to her character. But then maybe I like misunderstood. Maybe I was like,
Well, I think when we read that quote, we don't know about the alternative because Liam
oh,
always goes, "Oh, I owe Zayden my life," but like he literally owes him his life because it's only because of Zayden's sacrifice that the children got a chance to live and prove themselves.
right.
So,
Yeah. Well, I'm going to look for that quote again because now I want to reread it just to see, like,
mhm.
yeah. Because when I first read it, I was like, oh, so there's a sliver of goodness in her.
Yes, I remember feeling the same way
Okay. So maybe it was before we find out the whole, they were just going to be
because it's quite
scary.
near the end
The
that we
quote is near
find
the end?
out.
Oh, yeah.
No, no, no. The quote I think is in the first half, maybe, or around the middle, and then we find out just what Zayden has done. I think very close to the end.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like you said, her name is Lilith, so that could just be straight up foreshadowing right
I should have looked up what violets mean.
there. Now I want to look up what violets mean.
Look it up. Let us know.
The violet can signify modesty and humility and is often looked upon as a sign of innocence. Bunches of violets were hence used as gifts for newlyweds. Violets are symbolic of faith, mystical awareness, inspiration, spiritual passion, profuseness, and sovereignty.
Did you say fate?
Faith,
Oh. Oh, that would have worked so much better if it said fate.
right?
But I mean,
Sovereignty.
Violet has had to have a lot of faith in herself and what she's doing, and then
Yeah.
faith in Zayden.
Hmm.
It still works. I'm saying it works.
Well, thanks for joining us today in this in depth discussion we had on Fourth Wing, and we hope to see you next week.
We'll see you then. Bye for now.
Bye.